Well, in the Sabbath school lesson for today, we had two very interesting stories. And I believe the one about the Canaanite woman or Syrophoenician woman has some very special lessons about faith. And we are at a point in Earth's history where we need to be like this woman. So let's take a look at the story a little bit. There were really two reasons why Jesus was at this place called Tyre and Sidon. One is pointed out here in a letter 227, 1905. Jesus often withdrew from the multitude to avoid an outbreak of hostility. Now, I'm sure you studied what he said to the Pharisees, and you can imagine how riled up that got them. So it was time to leave, because there would have been some really unfortunate things that happened had he stayed. So he left. On one occasion, he withdrew to the borders of Tyre and Sidon. And that's the one we're going to talk about this morning. In Mark 7, verse 24 to 26, it says, "And from thence he arose and went into the borders of Tyre and Sidon." So there's the movement. He's addressing the Pharisees about their senseless traditions and exposes some of their very bad ones. And so then he goes, "And entered into an house, and would have no man know it, but he could not be hid." Wherever he went, people observed it, and they spread the word. So here we have this woman. "For a certain woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him and came and fell at his feet." The woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by nation, and she besought him that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. Now, anyone that has had any connection with a demon-possessed person, you know what a horrible thing it is. And there are people, I believe, that are demon-possessed that are called mentally ill today. But in those days, they didn't seem to say much about mental illness. I'm not saying that every mental illness is demon possession, but probably more of it than what we realize. And so this was a hopeless situation without God. And the mother knew what a terrible ordeal it was. And so she longed to have relief for her daughter. But here's what she meant. Desire of Ages, page 400. Christ did not immediately reply to the woman's request. He received this representative of a despised race as the Jews would have done. So, out of character of Jesus, but he was doing it to teach a lesson. He treated her in the same way that the Jews treated her. The very people that were supposed to help the world, just like Seventh-day Adventists are supposed to be people that are helping the world with their troubles and their trials and their heartaches and sorrows. Instead, they were turning these people away and acting as though they were of no value in God's eyes. And so it's a lesson for today. I don't think we are doing that intentionally or saying those kind of things today. But if there are people we could help and we don't want to help them, it's kind of saying the same thing in a different way. That we're just going to let them suffer instead of trying to help them. In this, he designed that his disciples should be impressed with the cold and heartless manner in which the Jews would treat such a case, as evidenced by his reception of the woman, and the compassionate manner in which he would have them deal with such distress, as manifested by his subsequent granting of her petition. So he wanted them to witness the attitude of the Jews and the attitude of God in contrast. And you know, even when we see things, sometimes it registers. And as we go through this, you can't help but wonder, what were the disciples thinking? Now, they apparently thought it was okay what he was doing, but I wonder if they thought that was a good way to treat somebody. It doesn't really tell us that point. So here we have the first encounter, and she comes seeking help, but he is completely indifferent. As far as all she could see, it was indifference. Now, sometimes I hear people thinking that God is indifferent to their plea to him. They're pleading for something. Maybe it's healing. Maybe it's a problem that has come up. They need help. Maybe it's a financial difficulty, and they ask God and he doesn't seem to do anything. Well, it's not the same purpose, but we have to have the faith of this woman to not worry about the indifference. She didn't spend any time worrying about, well, he's not paying attention to me. She just kept going and never was turned away. This is what people do when they have faith. They don't turn away. They trust. They believe he's going to help. Maybe not now, but he's going to help. And so they just keep moving forward. And this woman became one of the key Bible characters of Jesus' time that demonstrated what this faith really looked like. How do people act when they really have faith? And here she wasn't even a Jew, but she became a demonstration of faith. Going on in Desire of Ages, but although Jesus did not reply, the woman did not lose faith. So, as I was thinking about this story, as far as visible, she was all alone. She was struggling with a problem that Jesus didn't seem to care about. But behind the scenes, Jesus was giving her that kind of faith. He was making her like that so that she wouldn't give up. And, faith is a gift from God. It's not something that comes from us. And so she was receiving that flow of faith from Jesus. As he passed on, as if not hearing her, she followed him, continuing her supplications. Annoyed by her importunities, the disciples asked Jesus to send her away. Now, they didn't dare send her away, but they asked Jesus, she keeps bothering us. Why don't you send her away? They saw that their master treated her with indifference, and they therefore supposed that the prejudice of the Jews against the Canaanites was pleasing to him. You know, we see developing, especially in this country, among Christians, a very bad attitude toward Muslims. Now, this is the kind of thing that existed between the Jews and the heathen, and, you know, various groups of heathen. They looked down upon them, felt they were bad people, and we have to be careful. There is a danger for everyone to develop that kind of attitude towards certain groups of people. It's often when those people do a lot of bad things, or they manifest hatred toward us, but it's a tendency of human nature to look down on some group of people. So we need to be learning the lesson from this. Jesus appeared for a while to carry that out, but in the end, he demonstrated this is not the way to be. But it was a pitying Savior to whom the woman made her plea. And in answer to the request of the disciples, Jesus said, I don't know whether the woman heard him say it to them. It's very possible she did. I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So the disciples were thinking, well, that's the way we have always felt. That Jesus didn't come to help the heathen. He didn't come to help other groups of people. He came specifically for us, the Jews. And so it appeared that he was saying that, but he really wasn't saying that. This woman was one of the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Why? Because anybody could become a part of Israel. If they accepted Jesus, they became a part of Israel. And so he's speaking in that broader sense. Although this answer appeared to be in accordance with the prejudice of the Jews, it was an implied rebuke to the disciples. Now, they didn't understand it at that moment, but it says, which they afterward understood as reminding them of what he had often told them, that he came to the world to save all who would accept him. So here is another very important aspect, and Jesus was gently trying to open up that subject to them, that I came for this woman just as much as any Jew. Now in the Bible it says Jew first and then Gentile. That's true, because God had a special commitment to his people, and so that's why he worked with them, but they were supposed to work with everybody else. And Jesus had to demonstrate that in the way he did his ministry. In the second volume of Spirit of Prophecy, page 303, says the woman was encouraged that Jesus had noticed her case sufficiently to remark upon it, although his words conveyed no definite hope to her mind. And she now urged her case with increased earnestness. So the fact that Jesus just said something in regard to her case, that faith was encouraged, which also was coming from Jesus, and he was strengthening her through that. And she saw, if I keep asking him, he's going to give me what I asked for. In Mark 7, verse 27, we have this remark, the first one that he addressed to her. But Jesus said unto her, let the children first be filled. Now, he doesn't say the others won't be filled, but he says, let the children first be filled. For it is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it unto the dogs. Wow, what a test. He calls her a dog. Now, of course, he doesn't think of her that way, but that's the way the Jews thought of them. Now, in this country, we don't get the point very well because we treat our dogs better than people. I don't think this is pleasing to God, although I believe we should treat animals well, but they don't need to be treated better than people. I've been in other countries and seen how the dogs are. People don't let them in their house for sure, and they're skinny because they hardly get enough food to eat. They have to scavenge around to find food, and that's the kind of dog that this story is talking about. That the dog gets, the crumbs that are left over. They don't get a decent meal. And so, right then, as I thought about the story, she's being tested. Is she going to go home mad? Is she going to go home and say, well, if he treats me that way, I'm out of here? No. He was finding out, is there any self in her? If self rises up, she hasn't been changed. And so he gives a very severe test. And later you'll see she got the point of what he was saying. But the reason again that he said it is pointed out in Present Truth of May 25, 1899. This was the sentiment of the disciples. So although they had been with Jesus for quite some time now, they looked at her as a dog. And they hadn't changed their viewpoint from the other Jews that were rejecting Jesus. Going on in Desire of Ages, the woman urged her case with increased earnestness. So after he said that, she got even more earnest. She didn't back up. Bowing at Christ's feet and crying, Lord, help me. Jesus, still apparently rejecting her entreaties, according to the unfeeling prejudice of the Jews, answered, it is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to dogs. This was virtually asserting that it was not just to lavish the blessings brought to the favored people of God upon strangers and aliens from Israel. That's the way it looked to her. She didn't know any better at this point anyway. And so this was a real test. But she had the faith to hang on anyway. Now, if you can have your selfish nature irritated by God and still hang on, then you got faith. And it'd be nice if when we get converted that all of self goes away. But it doesn't. It has to have many lessons in being pinched this way or that way. And one of the ways is we don't feel we get respected the way we should, or we don't get the office we want to get or think we should get. There's just a lot of ways that we can have self rise up. Or maybe somebody rebukes us and even does it publicly. But, you know, that's where we find out, do we have any more self? And that gives us an opportunity to get rid of it. But this woman didn't seem to have it in that. She might have had it in other areas, but she didn't have it in that area. And so she didn't turn away, but she kept on going. But the woman saw that her opportunity had come. She turned the comment of Jesus into a blessing. Beneath the apparent refusal of Jesus, she saw a compassion that he could not hide. So he could say with words things that would hurt, but she could see that's not the way Jesus is. Truth, Lord, she answered. Yet dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from their master's table, while the children of the household eat at the Father's table. Even the dogs are not left unfed. They have a right to the crumbs that fall from the table abundantly supplied. So she takes what Jesus says and says, I'm willing to be looked upon as a dog, but I have a right to get the crumbs. Certainly, this was the woman of great faith. So, while there were many blessings given to Israel, was there not also a blessing for her? She was looked upon as a dog, and had she not then a dog's claim to a crumb from his bounty? That was faith laid hold. You know, in many situations, all there is a glimmer of hope that God is going to do something about the situation. There's not much to base anything on, but faith can see that little glimmer of hope and presses forward, not giving up until God takes care. Either, like with some people, with Moses, he kept asking God after he had been denied to go in Canaan. He would talk to God about it. And finally, God said, don't talk to me anymore about it. Well, then we need to stop if he says, don't talk to me. But if he doesn't say that, we are to keep pressing for what is needed. And then we have also Paul in the New Testament, and he had poor eyesight, and he had other health issues which made it difficult for him to preach the gospel as much as he did. And he thought, well, if I didn't have this, I could do a lot more. And so he pled with God to heal him. Apparently he did it 3 times. And on the 3rd time, God said, forget it. I'm not going to heal you. It's not best. Because my strength is made perfect in weakness. So, but until that time comes, faith keeps moving forward. It does not turn back because Jesus doesn't seem to be doing anything. It doesn't turn back because we have been hurt by whatever. And it doesn't turn back even when he seems to give a no. But We can see through that glimmer. There's a glimmer of hope there, in spite of what he's seeming to be saying. She begs for the crumbs that fall from the master's table. If she may have the privilege of a dog, she is willing to be regarded as a dog. How many of us be willing to do that? She has no national or religious prejudice or pride to influence her course. So she doesn't hate the Jews. She is free of prejudice. She's free of pride, thinking she's superior to other people. And she immediately acknowledges Jesus as the Redeemer and as being able to do all that she asks of him. So her faith has been continuing to increase through this experience, not because she was so great, but Jesus was passing faith to her, which he will do to any one of us that needs it. He will help our faith if we will accept it, if we will receive it. He will give it to us. And finally, she latched on to the fact, I know he can do what I've asked him to do, and I believe he's going to do it. Here, Christ meets one of an unfortunate and despised race that has not been favored with the light of God's Word. Yet, she yields at once to the divine influence of Christ and has implicit faith in his ability to grant the favor she asks. So, the issue of what we get is how much faith do we have? Jesus said to one, you may not have much faith, or the man said, I have some faith, I don't have enough, so increase my faith. That's a good prayer as well, if we can see that we don't have what's needed. But when you realize it, it was the Israelites, the Jews, we call them, that should have been the examples of faith. And so Seventh-day Adventists are called to be like this woman, even though we are the special people of God, we are to be the ones that have that kind of faith. At ASI, we heard some beautiful stories of faith that God put in the hearts. The one that touched me the most was the doctor, Dr. Nelson, and he went to Haiti after the rebellion against the leadership of the country, and gangs had taken over, and he was working over there to help the people. I mean, talk about risk. He had risk on every hand, and yet he faithfully ministered to those people. He didn't think, well, you know, if I was back home, I wouldn't have all these problems to face and I'd be better off financially and all the rest. No, he only thought about the people he was trying to help. And there's other stories, but that one really touched my heart. Maybe you can watch it. It was the Sabbath Vesper meeting, if you haven't seen it. We need more Adventists like him that are willing to go wherever. Of course, sometimes it takes faith to stay where you are, because I've had an experience where I really wanted to get out of Wildwood, but the Lord didn't give me permission. And it wasn't pleasant to stay there for a while, but you have to stay where he wants you. That's what faith will do. So now the Savior is satisfied. He has tested her faith in him. By his dealings with her, he has shown that she, who has been regarded as an outcast from Israel, is no longer an alien, but a child in God's household. So she was of equal privilege to any Jew. In Jesus' eyes, equal privilege. Then deserved help as much as any Jew. As a child, it is her privilege to share in the Father's gifts. Christ now grants her request and finishes the lesson to the disciples. Turning to her with a look of pity and love, he says, "O woman, great is thy faith. Be it unto thee even as thou wilt." So she desired it, and he said, "Since you desire it, and you have trusted through all these things, you trusted when I showed indifference to you, you trusted when the disciples wanted to send you away, and you even trusted when I called you a dog, and so you're going to have what you want." Now here's the other reason why Jesus went over there in Desire of Ages 402. This was the only miracle that Jesus wrought while on this journey. And I didn't have time to double check the distance, but I thought I remembered that he had to walk 50 miles to get to where this woman was. It was for the performance of this act that he went to the borders of Tyre and Sidon. So yes, it was time to get away from the Jews because there was going to be a big fight going on. But even a bigger reason, why did he go there? To help that one woman. His plan was to help her. All those 50 miles of walking there was to help her. And in the process to give his disciples some very important lessons. The two most prominent ones, to give them a demonstration of what faith looks like, and to help them to get away from their Jewish attitude toward other people. He wished to relieve the afflicted woman and at the same time to leave an example in his work of mercy toward one of a despised people. So that's the same message we're to give to people. And those, we can know that Christians in general are despising the Muslim world and maybe some others, Buddhists and Hindus and so on. But that is not to be our attitude. Our attitude is to be that they also are to be given the privilege of becoming a follower of Jesus in these last hours of Earth's history, and that we will do anything and everything to help them as much as another Christian to be able to be blessed by the message God has entrusted to us.